Hi, my name's Katie Kraynak, and I'm a dancer and a teacher at Praise His Name with Dancing, which is a Christian ballet school. Two of the significant roles I've played with my time at Praise His Name have been the role of Mary and the role of Eve in our Christmas show. Both of these roles are heavily loaded with theological ideas. Everyone has an opinion on Eve and Mary. A big part of preparing for the roles is just obviously reading the text itself, but also trying to get the historical context or some opinions of like experts to try and embody the character. But it's sort of hard because Eve, especially, it was just one song, and you have to tell this whole story of this woman and this downfall. So
Do you feel like they portray human nature? They show different sides of humanity, or do you think they're like both the same type of like
I
human?
think Eve unfortunately represents the worst parts of humanity with her pride and almost like greed and just wanting to know more. God saying like, this is enough for you right now, and her saying, no, I want more, I want to know everything. So that's sort of the dark side of humanity. And Mary a lot of the times gets shown as like pure, virginal, perfect, and like she's upheld as this standard of literal perfection. But if you look at the history, it was a really challenging spot to be in. Imagining like trying to tell your fiance, like, I'm pregnant, but I didn't cheat on you. I'm pregnant, but I'm still a virgin. Especially, she was very young. She was a teenager and she had to move, and she would have sounded like a crazy person to explain, like, no, an angel visited me and told me, and this is the king of the universe. So I think she is a lot more vulnerable. She had to be a lot more afraid than I think a lot of depictions of her showcase.
Do you think that fear strengthened her faith?
I think that it probably strengthened her faith. And I don't think like she never doubted or like never was like, is this really real? Is this what's happening? Overcoming the doubt is just like a brilliant picture of faith in her life.
Do you think either of them had to go out of their way going against human nature in their actions?
I think Eve definitely just falls in line with human nature, like the attributes we were talking about earlier. I think Mary had something a little bit extraordinary with her belief.
Do you think, based on what you've learned, human nature can be said to be fundamentally good or fundamentally bad?
That's a hard question. Before the corrupting force of the serpent, Adam and Eve were good. They were just living in the Garden of Eden. They were living with the land. They were living with God, and it was good. But it wasn't until the outside force of the serpent, like coercing Eve, were they evil? I mean, obviously it was still Eve's choice. So I think there's that like a little bit of seed of badness. Before any outside forces, it was good. So I think that represents like an inherent part of humanity.
Moving directions into talking about crisis and uncertainty, even Mary's situations remind me of Pretty Shield's quote, "I'm living a life I do not understand." All these women were thrown into complete crisis, change, and uncertainty, and the differences between how they adapt and survive these crises can be seen by comparing the photos I've taken and used throughout this presentation. Like the crow, Eve had lost everything. Her entire life in the garden was gone, and she was ripped away from her way of living. This is seen in my photos, as after she was removed from the garden, there are no more dancers on stage, no more colors, not even a set behind her. This mirrors Chief Plentycoo's statement after the buffalo had gone, and therefore the crow's way of life, when he said, after this, nothing happened. This is very different from how Mary adapted to her situation, which I actually believe is closer to how Hannah Arendt describes Eichmann and how he dealt with his change in life. As everything around Mary changed and she was given this great responsibility suddenly, she had this extremely powerful, large system behind her. This is seen in my photos as Mary is rarely alone and she is often being physically held by her support system. While the two systems behind Mary and Eichmann are very different and obviously led to very different actions, the parallels continue when the two systems gave Mary and Eichmann their set of beliefs that they would follow loyally and faithfully in order to adapt to their crises. Since Eve and Mary are so often used in arguments on human nature, looking at how they dealt with crisis and uncertainty and getting Katie's perspective really allowed me to get a better understanding on humanity and what it is to be human. Special thanks to Katie for all of her help and talent. Thank you.